Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Tax, the show for growth-minded CPAs and real estate pros in tax. I'm TJ Sponsel. In today's episode, we will discuss how to build an international tax practice and the common challenges many CPAs face. Joining us today for the first time on Let's Talk Tax is my colleague, Greg Lambrecht. Greg is a principal in the McGuire Sponsel's Global Business Services practice, specializing in international tax planning and compliance. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me, TJ. Appreciate it.
Well, Greg, I appreciate all you do. And for our listeners out there, our GBS practice, which is what we call our international practice, has really gained a tremendous amount of momentum in recent months. I think it's something, as you look back, really our first foray into things international was our disc practice back in 2012.
Sure.
Even though it's really not international, it's just exports. And to see when, obviously, we did an acquisition in 2020 and we continue built out our international practice, the more we build it out, is the more we see the CPA's need for that, okay, in terms of a true resource for international tax matters, because that can be wide-ranging. It can be obviously the expansion of a client into another territory, another country. It can be maybe compliance they've not done before. It could be a transfer pricing need that they didn't know they had.
Sure.
What's your summation of kind of where our GBS practice is right now within our Alliance network?
Sure. So, I joined the firm in November, and what I've seen is that there's just a tremendous need for our Alliance CPA firms. They have lots of questions. They may not have the correct mix of experience of people, even though some of our CPAs have been in the industry 10, 20, 30, some of them 40, 50 years. But the tax landscape has changed dramatically in the international tax space. They may have clients that are investing outside the U.S. for the first time. They may have clients that are investing inside the U.S. for the first time, and they come to us with a variety of different questions. And what I've seen is we've been able to meet their needs in a very unique way, fill gaps for them, help them deal with other maybe firms that are questioning what they're doing if they have larger clients. So it's been really a great experience as far as helping our alliance firms.
Well, it was interesting when we first launched this GBS practice in 2020, we came at it with very consulting mindset that CPAs were, they handle all the compliance piece. We'll do the consulting, the expansion or the inbound investment. We'll handle that piece and maybe transfer pricing studies. But the CPAs, they'll want to do the compliance piece. And what was fascinating, Greg, is when we started going out and rolling this out, and obviously COVID delayed some of this from 2020 into 2021. But when we really, in earnest, about 2.5 years ago, started talking more and more CPAs about this specialty we have, is that, people know we're an R&D shop. They know we do cost segregation and other things. But it was interesting when we started talking about international. I mean, a couple of people, their eyes got wide open like they were starving for some counsel. And we realized that we kind of overshot the runway a little bit because the compliance piece was what they were craving. That just not so much the consulting stuff was, that those onesie twosies, that's important, but it was the ongoing compliance that really kept them up.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been in the public accounting world and in international tax since 1990. I started when I was 12, TJ, so our listeners can do the math and figure out how old I am there. Yeah, that's right, exactly. But what really happened here, when TCJA came into place in 2017, the entire international tax landscape changed dramatically, as you know. But what really changed, I think, the most and has been the most surprising to the CPA firms is the amount of compliance change. There's a form that we filled out for decades now, the Form 5471. When I started in public accounting, that was about 6 to 8 pages maximum. I've seen them as long as 100 to 120 pages now for a single entity. The complexity is ramped up exponentially, and the interplay between the schedules within the form itself has gotten really complicated. So our CPA firms, they just really were struggling with that. We've been able to step in and help sometimes remediate some deficiencies. We've been able to sometimes step in and help them with a new client to really fill that gap, the knowledge gap. I've seen thousands of them. So there's things that are very intuitive, and the people that we have here at McGuire Sponsel have similar experience, some of them. So we've been able to really fill the gap in that way. And you mentioned when we first started the GBS practice, we were really looking to be, I would say, somewhat more of a consulting shop, if I could say it that way. But here's what I see out in the international landscape. If you own the numbers, if you're doing the compliance, if you're doing the 5471s and the 8858s, the 8865s, all the different forms, and you own the numbers, you're much more adept at being able to help your client plan, reduce their global tax footprint. So I always say, whoever owns the numbers, owns the client. We're helping our alliance CPA firms do that. We're helping them make sure they keep that compliance in-house. And when the consulting projects come up, and they do come up, there's always questions. They're going to be a lot more nimble, and we're going to be able to help them be the backbone of that as well.
Well, and looking at kind of the composition of our alliance firms and how they've approached international historically, I really think of three buckets, okay, is that you have a firm that's a member of some type of alliance, and they rely on that alliance firm, or maybe other firms within that alliance to answer their questions and help fill that void that they have regarding, or that need they have for international tax compliance or consulting. Okay. There's the second one is you have a firm that maybe has one or two people that handle all the international matters. Okay. And that may be on a full-time basis, or they just may have maybe on a part-time basis, depending on the firm and the size. And then there's a third that they just avoid it.
Yeah, right.
They don't really understand it. They don't have the time, because frankly, in our industry right now, we have a labor shortage, and we have a problem with, we have more work than many firms can handle. And so unfortunately, the international piece is one that is not invested in a lot. Obviously, you've been here a few months, you've been doing this a long time. How would you say in those three scenarios, how is McGuire Sponsel able to fit into those three different scenarios? Yeah,
that's a great question. When we have member firms that have alliances, let's say with the Crow, for example, or another of the big firms, a lot of times what we see with them is that maybe the volume of what they want done is not enough to rise to a level where they're getting immediate attention. So what we've been able to do with firms like that, we've been able to augment what they're doing with their alliance, networks, and we've been able to give them, in many cases, a lot more timely feedback, I'll say. As you know, we have a lot of experience here at McGuire Sponsel, Big Four persons. We're continuing to build that out. So we're able to bring that expertise, but oftentimes we're able to do two things. We're able to bring it in a more timely manner, and we're able to do it in a more, sometimes even more thorough way, because we're giving it more attention. So that's how I would say we've been able to interact with the alliance firms. The next category that you kind of brought up is there's a CPA firm. They've got one or two guys. They do all the international. But here's what I've experienced down the decades of international. There's a lot of specialty. There's a lot of things that people just don't see on a regular basis. So things will come up they're just not sure about. We had one, you and I worked on a mutual one together. It was a very complex technical issue that the firm just hadn't seen before. They wanted some more expertise in that area. We were able to come in and augment what they're doing. Very intelligent people on their side with some international experience, but we were just able to augment and really give them, here's the thing, we really gave them a deeper level of comfort when they went back to their client. They were able to say, hey, this is the answer. This is how we see it. They were getting some more consulting from another very large firm that we disagreed with, quite frankly, and they ended up backing down. It gave them a huge comfort level to have that support on the back end. And then we have firms that just have never delved into this area. And what we're seeing there is we're helping them retain their clients. We're helping them make sure that that relationship is strong. And sometimes maybe we're helping them if they've got some remediation, we're able to step in and really add some expertise and somewhat smooth over those types of situations.
We have this work called controversy work, in lack of a better term, in terms of, that's obviously a situation where a taxpayer has not done the proper compliance. They may be going through some type of eureka moment with their business, an acquisition or selling or something like that, or just trying to reduce their exposure with the IRS. I look back at my time doing this for a long number of years. I have been doing this, is that sometimes CPAs are uncomfortable with broaching the subject of the client has exposure. I've signed the return. There's exposure on the return I signed. How do I broach this subject with my client? Okay. And how do I help them understand and not fall on my face, so to speak. You know, that's because that's one thing that I like the R&D credit. You know, we'll meet with a CPA. This happened years ago as we were building up the firm. It's like, oh my gosh, my client's eligible for the R&D credit. I'd never introduced this to him. How do I broach this subject with him? You know, and it's like, well, you let us help you with that conversation. So obviously we face those situations as a firm throughout our various practices, but GBS it happens a lot in GBS because of the lack of understanding. Can you walk us through how we approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing that we try to do is we try to help our firms educate their clients and help them understand the complexity and just ease them into that discussion. We will at times communicate directly with the client. We'll send them, just a short summary of what we view the situation as, and at the same time, what the solution is. So here's maybe the deficiency that you had, the problem, something that you missed. We see it very frequently. We'll try to let the client know that it's not uncommon, and here's how we would remediate it. And then we have the back office to help our CPA firms do all the back work and to do it in a timely manner to help get that filed as soon as possible. And then to continue identifying situations that might come up prospectively.
Well, and I think that's part of the pledge that we've always had to the CPA community is that, hey, we're here to help. We're going to respect the relationship with you have your client. We're here to be supportive of you. And we're not going to come in and try to say, aha, you did that. This is an error or this was overlooked. We're here to come in and complement how you are serving your client.
Yeah.
We just have the expertise and the bandwidth to be able to take on these challenges or the situation.
Yeah, and I think when you've been around for a long time in serving clients, and you know that it's always a difficult conversation when you have to go to a client and say, hey, we might have missed X, Y, or Z. And so it all begins with the relationship. We try to support the CPA in that relationship. One of the things that I think is very refreshing to the CPA firms is the way that we work with our firms. We're only doing a piece of the puzzle. We're not trying to take anybody's client. So if they had to go outside and use a different type of firm, there could be a risk where they could lose their client. And in this particular case, when they deal with us, they know that we're not there to try to, we're there 100% to support their relationship with the CPA firm and to help them, make sure that stays strong.
One area that's really got a lot of momentum within our GBS practice right now is our transfer pricing practice.
Absolutely.
That is just, it's like exponential growth. It's really unbelievable. And one things that I've learned over the past 4 or 5 years is that just how much misinformation was out there about transfer pricing, about what's involved, about what the cost is, where it applies. Can you kind of give us a 10,000-foot view of our transfer pricing practice, where it applies, and where we're different than maybe some people's perceptions on transfer pricing?
Sure. We're providing a reasonably cost solution to a serious problem. In the transfer pricing world, a lot of people think if I only have a little bit of, intercompany transactions, I don't need to do this. And the fact of the matter is, the way the code, the statute is written right now, if you have $1 of an intercompany transaction, technically you're supposed to have a transfer pricing study to support that transfer price between a related party. So a lot of our CPA firms' clients, they actually have transfer pricing need. They just don't know it. And there's a heightened awareness in this area. The IRS is looking at it. I just saw that a court has supported a $28 million fine against the taxpayer. And as we have better AI type solutions, and the government has that, we're giving them data when we do our compliance. So it's going to be an increased focus. And what we bring to that space is a lot of expertise, a lot of ability to do the right things. There's 10 specific things that you need according to the regulations that you have to have in a transfer pricing study. We cover them all, and we do it in a very, very cost-effective manner, extremely unique in the marketplace.
Well, and it shows. I mean, I look at how many we engaged just so far in 2024 compared to 2023. So I think it's because I think so many times people have assumed that this is some type of $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 project when we have proven and it's not.
Correct.
It's much more tailored to the client. It's not this boilerplate standard that we have. It's very much tailored to the client's obviously financial operations and locations.
Yeah. And what I would say from having come out of a much larger firm, what we do a transfer pricing study for, we're probably in the range of, I would say, 20 to 25% of the cost. It's sometimes even less than that. It's really a very unique way that we're doing it for our clients, cost effective, but yet we're crossing all the T's,
Sure,
dotting all the
it's
I's.
just a pure hourly structure.
Yeah.
Getting paid for our work.
Yeah, doing it with a lot of expertise.
Sure.
And helping our clients fill a real need.
I think one of the things that, for those that are familiar with our McGuire Sponsel, maybe not used our GBS practice, it's very different than the rest of the firm in the sense that, when we do a cost segregation project, we go out there and we do an engagement letter for a cost segregation project or for a 179D or for a 174 analysis. It's very project driven. With GBS, it's not. It has those aspects of those consulting projects.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's also this ongoing kind of continuous engagement, it feels like, with our alliance firms.
Sure.
We call them master service agreements, in which a firm is calling on us and we are literally their international tax practice. And they're just
absolutely
or department that they're just, instead of being around the corner or on a different floor, we're just maybe across the street or an airplane right away. Can you kind of talk about how the firms that we've had really built these successful relationships with our GBS practice have looked at us as their specialty tax colleagues, not this separate firm from themselves?
Yeah. So again, I'll go back. I'll use a real world example. I think it's makes it more helpful for people to understand. So we had a mutual client, you and I, contacted us again, the one I mentioned earlier, very technical issues called DCLs, dual consolidated losses. And they had a client that was being consulted from the other side, from a big firm. And we were able to speak with them. And here's what happened. I can be a little dorky, despite how, how my appearance, I'm a little nerdy sometimes, TJ. So anyway, we started going back and forth, just like I would have to someone sitting in a cube next to me or an office next to me. We were dialoguing via email. I actually said in there, "I'm your partner. I hope I'm not offending you by what I'm saying here. I think this example might not apply, et cetera, in this regulation." And they were just so grateful that I approached it from a partnering type of a perspective. Like, this is exactly how we work inside of our firm. We're colleagues together. You're not offending anybody. Keep pouring it on.
Sure.
And so we were just going back and forth and really reaching a solution that was good for their client. And again, providing backbone to them, expertise. We kind of wrapped up that project. About a week later, they had another situation with another client. They called me just like I was working for their firm. "Hey, Greg, we got this situation similar to before. Can you help us out?" We had some dialogue over a 2 to 3 day period. We came up with some solutions. I pointed a couple things out that maybe they hadn't really thought about. And I expect those types of situations just to continue with that firm that we work with. I will just be viewed as somebody that almost like works inside their firm. They bounce things off. We go back and forth. And it's been a really great experience. I've really enjoyed it personally.
Well, we've enjoyed you being here, that's for sure. I think that priority that we put a lot of emphasis on here at McGuire Sponsel is that commitment to the CPA client relationship. And I think you just highlighted it just there. I mean, yesterday I had a situation. We have a client that's been dragging their feet for 6 months where they're going to engage. And got a long time relationship with this firm. And the client's like, "Hey, I'm ready to get started. Can we go ahead and send an engagement letter today?" Well, obviously, if I didn't have respect for that CPA client relationship, I'd have fired the engagement letter off. Okay. Well, I also remember that this particular CPA, he likes to engage his clients, and then we act as a subcontractor. And so I could have easily said, "Oh, let's just blame it on 415 Rush," but I stopped, even to the point where it was a little uncomfortable.
Sure.
Because I wanted to answer the client. I wanted to get the engagement letter to the client because I want to show that, hey, we got momentum now. Let's go for it. But I waited. And I waited all day for that CPA to respond to about 9 o'clock last night.
Sure.
And he said, "Hey, TJ, let's have the engagement letter go through me. Apologize for the delay. Thank you for the relationship and always having our back." And those are the things for us as practitioners, and the pride that we take in this firm is that that's what we want. We want our alliance firms to know that we have their back. We're going to be their wingman, if you will, and understand that, hey, you may be busy. We're not going to jump on an opportunity just to satisfy the client. We're going to always have the ultimate respect for that the relationship with you have with your client. It's your client, not you're our client.
Absolutely.
We're helping you serve your client.
Absolutely.
Greg, what would you say? I think I look at all the different things that we offer as a firm, and so many things that we do obviously has a lot of benefit. Okay. It's also obviously maybe some of the things don't have benefit. They just have compliance requirements. What would you say a common trapdoor is that a client that's made, or a CPA that's been doing international tax, but there's a trapdoor that exists? And my thinking is that, I don't need to have that transfer pricing study done that you just mentioned. That I don't need to have that. Let me file these forms, and I'm not worried about that potential penalty. What are the trapdoors out there that exist for CPAs with international?
So I'm going to bring up two things, TJ. I think one, I'm going to circle back to transfer pricing, but we have a lot of clients that maybe don't fully understand how, when they have a company that they own that's offshore, they don't really understand how to calculate and do the forms for the international reporting. Okay, and the consequences of that can be really big. So when you have an offshore entity, sooner or later, you usually like to bring your money back. And the way that they've reported over the past, especially since 2017, the way that they've reported over those intervening years, the numbers on the form are going to have a huge impact on the taxability of money that comes back to the U.S. And so we're very conscious of that. That's a big trapdoor. There's certain schedules within a Form 5471 that, when I've picked up some of our, clients' returns that they've done, unfortunately, I look at it, I can tell within 30 seconds that there's some serious, remediation that needs to be done. So we'll go in and help them do that. But the long-term effect is that it's going to help their clients when they bring money back. That's a big trapdoor right there. Coming back to transfer pricing, as I mentioned, the IRS is getting more sophisticated in tracking data. They know what the intercompany transactions are because you're telling them. And there's just going to be, in the future, audits that are generated purely based on those forms. And let's say you get 3-4 years down the road and you do not have a transfer pricing study. Going back and trying to fix that later is much more expensive and much more difficult, and a lot less likely for the IRS to accept it, because you have a certain period of time to provide those reports. You're scrambling. You may or may not be able to get the documentation done in time. So those are two of the big trapdoors. And then I would say just a third one would be where we have the opportunity, especially with small businesses, to make certain elections where our clients can get foreign tax credits versus not getting foreign tax credits, being subject to double taxation or not being subject to double taxation. But those elections have to be made in a timely manner. So there is opportunity out there that maybe if our CPA firms are not super tuned into the international tax world, they're missing out on those things. So I'd say those are the three biggest things.
Well, I have one rapid fire question for you to finish our day. and this is something I'm always fascinated with, and looking at the different practice lines, the myths associated with our respective practice lines in terms of how a tax law applies to a client situation. What would you say are the biggest myths that you run into regarding international? Obviously, we talked about the trapdoors, but what's just a myth that you run into that you run into situations and they've gotten bad counsel in the past, and we have to correct that counsel? Yeah,
I think the biggest myth is on the compliance side. Like, hey, anybody can do it. Just put numbers on a form. It doesn't matter. That's the biggest myth, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The penalties associated with international tax reporting forms are enormous. So an incomplete Form 5471, let's say they had 5 entities, $10,000 per form per year, up to $50,000 per form per year if they can't remediate it. An inbound client has to fill out something called the 5472. The fines are even worse in that area. So I think that's the biggest myth, I would say, that anybody can do this. Just fill the forms out. You're going to be fine. There's way more folks in the IRS in this area. And so that would be the biggest myth.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Greg, thank you for joining us today. I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate you giving us your thought and your counsel.
My pleasure. Thanks, TJ.
And audience, thank you for listening and watching. Catch us on YouTube at Let's Talk Tax Podcast or at McGuiresponsel.com for all show notes and follow-up from each episode.